Namaste. Welcome to our Satsang. Well, let's take a few moments to kind of shed the day. So bring your awareness to your posture, to your body. And to your breath. And notice whatever sensations there are in your body, whatever thoughts there are in your mind, and welcome it all. Welcome yourself to yourself. And you can just let your awareness relax into your innermost heart, into the place of absolute peace that is always present in you. As you find your breath breathing in and out of the heart, just notice how any tensions of the day simply just melt away by themselves. There may still be thoughts and sensations there, it's okay. But the attention shifts into the heart. And let's work with a mantra for a little while. I use the mantra Ram, but you can use any mantra of your choosing. And let that mantra repeat itself in your heart. Ram, 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 Ram. And just notice what happens. You can do it softly under your breath if that helps you keep the mantra going and keep your mind on it. Or just silently in your mind. And imagine the mantra to say itself in the heart. And as you keep the mantra up, keep your mind on it, you may allow a real shift of energy into a deeper space. Just notice that if it happens. And now we'll close this short meditation in a moment. But I invite you to stay in that inner space, even when your eyes are open and your attention is both directed inward and outward. So take a deep breath. Exhale. Inhale again. Feel your heart now with the last Om. Now, see if you can somehow grasp this with your mind. You can understand this intellectually. But behind an intellectual understanding, there may be a sense of the reality of that. There is a vast and unlimited and timeless awareness. When you're asleep, in deep sleep, your consciousness is attuned to that. Your consciousness is absorbed in that, but it's not aware of itself. And then we wake up, and that consciousness in us creates time and space and an entire world full of things and beings and energies and galaxies. And then that consciousness gets involved in this world. It identifies with the world it creates in itself. This is what we know as ego. Now that little artificially created self appears and says, I'm this body. I'm looking out of this body into the big world out there. But the big world out there only exists in your awareness. Very similar to the events in your dream state. When your body, mind is peacefully lying in bed, then a part of it internally creates an entire world that just exists for the duration of that dream. And it creates a dream self. I just had a dream with an old friend of mine, and I was back in my 20s, and so was she. And we just had some stuff to do, I guess. Or this consciousness in me had some stuff to do with this figure of me and her that I created. And then that dream dissolves. But here in this long dream of a world, we meet in the apparently same world every day. And so this era of perception occurs that we identify with a little piece of matter, this body. So the first awakening is out of sleep into this world, that this consciousness creates inside of us, that exists inside of us, even though we call it outside. And then the second awakening is that consciousness awakens out of that dream of being a body, being an ego. There's, oh, there's a larger consciousness, a consciousness that is not different in different people. The consciousness that creates this world that we share in each one of us. When we wake up, there it is. It is the same consciousness in you and me and everyone else that creates this world. But as long as we think we're egos, we think we're just these separate bodies that are usually at war with each other in some way or desire each other in some way. So that's the first and second awakening. So the second awakening is what's called liberation. Liberation is the awakening out of this trance state of ego and all its conflicts into the realization that there's an incredible, great, peaceful presence or consciousness that is everywhere and in everything. So that's a profound liberation because it takes us out of that little prison of I. And then there's a third liberation. And that is the liberation of the heart. Realize that within this awareness that we all share, or let me say it this way, that the expression of that limitless awareness that we all are is love. And we're it. So we become aware of this vastness of our being. The little ego is still there. It tries to survive. It does its best. It has its little tantrums and, its busyness and its distractions and all that, But once you've really seen through it, it's like a big tree, the big tree of ego, but you've cut the root. The tree may still stand there for a while, but its main source of juice is cut. And so slowly, piece by piece, the leaves dry up and the branches fall down, and eventually the thing just isn't anymore what it used to be. A shadow of its old self, you might say. But in that process, love awakens. And love, when it's experienced through the filter of ego, it's enmeshed with attachment and emotion. And so it becomes sort of a farce. That love, what we commonly call love in our culture, is not the love I'm speaking of. It's an emotional event that usually doesn't lead to much happiness. A momentary thrill, maybe even a lifetime of a good relationship. But then somebody dies first. Somebody leaves. And that love, that sense of love, comes to an end. And that is what gives love a bad name to the ego. As much as it wants it, it also fears it, because you get really high, then you can get really smashed down. But that's attachment, empowered by the pure love of the real core essence of our being. So when that moment of that awakening, the awakening of love comes, and you just have this great experience of something that is so profound that you're willing to move to the other side of the planet if your beloved lives there. Or you change your profession, or you change your whole life, or you become a monk, or whatever you do. that power becomes or settles itself into the ego's tendency to be attached. And then it becomes toxic. Because now the ego attachment is empowered by that essence. And that's the source of a lot of trouble. So let's just clean up that sense of love that we have, clean it up of attachment. What's left? What's left is a state of blissful awareness, of loving awareness that is always present in the very core of our being. And it can be covered up and obstructed in all kinds of different ways, but there's actually not that many ways. There's a sense, the basic sense of separation that gives the mind a distracted quality, always running after something else. That's the most subtle layer of mind. Then there's the layer of thoughts. Positive thoughts, peaceful thoughts, great, we get to keep them, no problem there. But the stressful ones we need to pay attention to, because one stressful thought and you're no longer in the heart. And then we have negative emotions. That's the grossest layer of the mind. So when we can clear the mind, and we have specific skills for that, when we clear the mind, what's left is that expanded awareness of the heart. And it's just as pristine and timeless and ever present as the awareness that creates all of this, which commonly we call God. And the specialty of the house, the particular way of heart sourcing, lies in the recognition that we all at any moment can choose to attune ourselves to that innermost essence. Interior, always interior to any stress that may be present in our being. At any moment we have that option to attune ourselves to that inner essence and to drink from it, to allow it to flow from the heart in our being, to allow it to be an actual direct experience, moment to moment. So I want to just stop here and see if we can have any kind of discussion about that, or questions or anything. Is this at all clear? There's a wonderful saying in India, and it goes like this: Mukti, or liberation, is the maid servant of bhakti, or of love. So we have the first awakening. The first awakening is this becoming aware of the world. The second awakening is the realization that we're not a little ego locked into a cage of this body-mind, but that we're actually the awareness that's looking out of our eyes, that's listening through our ears, that is tasting inside of us, that is feeling in us. The awareness that is aware of itself. So that's the first big jailbreak out of the jail of ego. And then the next part is to fill that. That's like the first realization is just like, oh, you mean it's all not all that real, the way we thought it was so real, that physical universe? No, it's just an appearance that appears in consciousness with all its elements intact. So that's the view of wisdom. And wisdom tells us that all this appearance, just like a dream at night, is ultimately empty. Although when you bump your toes into a rock, it will still bleed. But it has that nature of emptiness when you see it deeply through the eye of wisdom. Then the eye of the heart is not about the realization of emptiness. That comes first. And with that, attachment, it's like this awareness that your awareness is really sort of the death blow. It may take a while for it to die, just like that tree, but it's like the death blow to attachment. Because how much are you going to really believe that you need to have this or that to be happy? You are this or that already. So that's the eye of wisdom opening. And then that perception of emptiness flips around again, and it shows up as absolute fullness, the fullness of this incredible world that arises in our awareness, filled with love, filled with this essence of completeness. So, I'm trying to be quiet so you can say something. So this becomes a conversation of kind. Please.
So I relate so much to what you're saying, and what I notice for myself is that there are moments when I guess it feels like opening, but or love feels like it's swelling, and it feels so visceral. It like almost what happens to me is it feels like something's going to break or rip. It's really quite a visceral sensation, and even when you began speaking, it's the same. I can feel it now, like this kind of breaking forward, and almost the visceral sensation I find intimidating. Like I can breathe, but it feels like I'm going to come apart or something like that.
Well, what's coming apart is that limited sense of self. And that is an entity, it wants to survive, right? So it says, oh no, we're not going to that love place, forget it, right? That's the end of me, right? So, and that's then mixed with all the old tapes of, if I really open my heart, then I'll get hurt, right? Which only comes from a love, but we all are experts on that. The love that is attached, or that attaches itself. And it's not really love, it's attachment that attaches itself, right? But now that spark of love, that little essence of love, has come into the attachment, and the attachment has co-opted it, right? And so it appears that it is love, because it has that type of energy to it, right? But it's really attachment, and we need to get very clear about what is love and what is attachment, because love never, 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 never hurts. It's not capable of hurting. Attachment always hurts. So there's a very big difference. So we need to kind of settle into that, right? But I love what you were saying about that visceral feeling of the heart opening. This can be very dramatic. I remember a friend of mine, we were in the situation of just this really juicy, a few of us sitting in a little room, and the love was just so palpable. And he was convinced he was having a heart attack. I mean, really, he was reaching for the phone to dial 911 because there was this like intense pain going on, right? So what this is, we have to understand what that is that we have this crust of old emotional pains and fears and not enough and all of this weight on top of the heart. And when that heart wakens up, it just expands, and this old crust can really break like a shell of a nut that breaks open, right? And it can cause physical sensations that can be very intense. Like you have this sharp pain in his heart. So that's possible, but don't get too worried about it. It's actually a good thing. But then also understand that, as you're feeling this, of course now the pieces of that old crust, once the heart expands, and this can happen many times, it expands more and more and more. And each time the old crust gets kind of like broken up into smaller chunks, but it's still there. And it's going to try to reassert itself, but it doesn't really have a chance. Once you're awakened, once that inner guru has made him or herself known to you, the show is over. The show of the ego is over. But it may just still stand there like the tree whose root is cut. It just stands there for a while. It may take a few years. Now, when you have that awareness, you can take a saw and an axe and chop at it. And that'll just make you happier a lot sooner. So I recommend it. And that is the skills of finding stillness to counteract that distractedness of the mind, right? The subtle level, right? Finding truth, that we do that through the work of Byron Katie, to really question our stressful thoughts. And just letting ourselves go into a place of harmony, of pure presence, to allow these layers of old emotions, painful emotions, to dissolve. So when you have these three capacities, or these skills to reach these three capacities of stillness, truth, and presence, you can completely overcome the suffering of the mind. And that's all the suffering there is. And with that, as we progress in that, the heart becomes increasingly free. And you'll notice during your day, it's just like you'll notice more and more that you're not thinking. It may be weird at first. It's like, what's wrong with me? But you'll notice you're perfectly fine. Notice actually you're finer than ever before. Because you're in a place of peace. And I said last time we met, I talked about this time when my teacher turned to me and said, "Oh, Ramgiri, you're in bliss." I'm going like, bliss? What are you talking about? And then I noticed, because it was so subtle, I didn't have the sensitivity to really taste it yet. That also has to grow for a while, When we have this big heart opening, boom, it happens. Right? That everybody can feel that. But it's that subtle peace, that subtle bliss that permeates our being more and more. And then, of course, when some kind of trouble shows up, which always comes in order for what? To lead us to a greater depth. Then we can take that blissful source in us and heal what needs to be healed, or bring to peace what needs to be brought to peace inside of us. Most powerful healing, and to go directly to that essence of the heart. You can write in your questions or comments if you have any. We're very open for that. Please do. Leslie?
When it's Vanessa, right?
Yeah.
When Vanessa was talking about the visceral feeling, what do you suggest you do when that starts happening? Do you walk through it? Do you get still?
Enjoy it.
Okay.
And look with amusement at the tendency of the ego mind to say, "Oh no, can't let that love happen." It's old story of having to protect. Yeah, what are you protecting? And that's the story of a scary world out there. And that these stories, these thoughts need to be worked with. We need to find the truth out about that. You know, you have a story of there's a scary world, the world is a scary place, and all the 3,000 other hobbies that the mind has to regenerate itself and keep itself alive through these beliefs, right? They need to be questioned. We need to see the truth about what's actually going on. Because when you have that second awakening, I don't know where this came from, the first, second, and third awakening, but it makes sense to me. It's like the second awakening of realizing you're not this little ego. There's some larger identity here, a larger presence, a peacefulness, a vastness to your being, right? Well, that's a great flash of an insight. But there are still all these thoughts that there's a scary world out there, that people cannot be trusted, I'm not good enough, go on and on and on. In our upcoming retreat, we're going to work on some of that. Those general ways of how we see reality, how we describe reality in our minds and therefore see it, that we don't usually think to question. It's clear that I'm stressed when I think, John lied to me and, lying is bad and all of those kind of thoughts. So that's pretty clear. It shows up on my radar as a stressful thought easily, right? But when I look at the more insidious, more hidden way that I describe my world, my big thing, this was sort of a big first awakening to that kind of work on the level of thought. I was told by Katie to question this thought. It's possible for a person to hurt another person. I'm going like, why would you ask us to question that? That's just the way it is. It would have never occurred to me to question that. And a half hour later, my life had shifted. My whole world had shifted. And I can't give you that experience. You have to earn it by doing the questioning of your thoughts. And it's so easy, a kid can do it. As long as we don't question these articles of belief, and that's really our religion. That's the golden calf. It's like, oh, people can hurt people. Yeah, I was so sure of it. And generally, the biggest aha moments I had many times in terms of working my thinking were the ones where I questioned thoughts that I, up until 5 minutes before, couldn't realize that they could even be questioned. But there's nothing in the mind, nothing, that has the power to keep you prisoner. Only your own mind. Because we now live in the spiritual community in many places, like here, for instance, there is a lot of this, oh, everything is wonderful and everything's great and so on. And we don't do the practice yet. That's, a lot of people, it's different in California because it's been there for a longer time. People are like deeper into it, right? But here, it's like, oh, yoga is just great and we do all this stuff. But, if you really want to be free, you have to get very focused in your desire for that freedom. And you need to find the practice and you need to find the guidance and you have to walk the walk until these mind aspects that keep making that unreal ego appear real, until they're dissolved, and dissolved for good. Then they won't come back. Nisargadatta said something like, temporary happiness. I can't remember how he said it, but it's basically a temporary happiness is not happiness. That's what we've always had, a little break from our misery. And I invite you to be acutely aware that this is no longer enough for you. If it is not permanent, it does not deserve the name happiness. It does not deserve the name freedom. And then there's the other trick that the mind does. Oh, that's already in me. Yeah, I know that because I've tasted it before. But can you live it 24/7? Then it's just another excuse of the mind to say, oh, practice is not necessary because I'm already liberated. Well, whoopee-doo. Now, Katie said it this way: when they come to kill you and you feel nothing but pure love for them, then your work is done. So our goal is not a little goal. Our goal is the highest goal that human beings can aspire to, the greatest of all goals. And it's absolutely achievable because it's already inside of us. We have to get free of that which is not true, of the old attachments to our emotional ways. And a fantastic thing is happening now. It's that with today's technology, I have a guess here. I don't know if this is true, but I have a guess that with today's technology, everybody's on these machines all the time. It's so distracting. I mean, you can't even see a couple or a family sitting around the table any longer without one or the other person being on their machines. So it's so distracting. So the mind becomes so disjointed that always, something sort of swings to one extreme, then it swings back, right? And now what we see, the 20 to 30-year-olds are just, there's this tremendous hunger for this solid state of peace, of awareness, of inner joy, insurpassable inner joy. So you're all invited to yourself.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there any exceptions where love and attachment can coexist?
But they do coexist.
Okay.
But what happens is this, it's like, if I fall in love with you, I have this moment of pure love that my mind does not yet comprehend. It feels it because it's the most powerful moment that I may have experienced, right? It's like, look at your eyes, and what actually happens is that I recognize myself. That awareness, that divine awareness out of which everything comes, recognizes itself in these two, in the other pair of eyes. Now, this may happen to me, it may not happen to you. And sometimes it happens to both people at the same time. If it only happens to one, we're in trouble already. But if it happens to both, then they have a great romance for a little while. And then you immediately just think about all our thoughts, all our patterns of relationship and marriage. Oh boy, it's like a minefield. It's like immediately, it's like, I want you as my property. You now have a whole laundry list of things that you're supposed to do. Make me happy is on top, right? Do my laundry, and so on, right? Now, make me happy is sort of the first one, the top one, right? And you may have the same thing, make you happy or give you security or something like that. So men and women have similar but slightly different ones, right? The laundry list items, they're on different positions on the laundry list usually, right? But this primary thing is that you're supposed to make me happy, whatever that is for me, right? Hopeless. Absolutely hopeless. So you just written the script of your relationship and you have guaranteed its failure because it's hopeless. You cannot make me happy. Only I can do that. The same is true for you. Now, if I'm happy and you're happy, we can be happy together. We've got it made. But as soon as my attachment comes in and says, no, you should be different in a even tiny little way, at that moment, I no longer love you. At that moment, I want to control you. I want to change you. I want to manipulate you. I want you different. And at that moment, I'm fallen out of heaven into hell. It's just that little thought. It's not quite perfect. Boom. You know, that's called falling out of love. Because in love, everything is perfect. It's perfect anyway. The question is, are we getting the hang of it or not? If we think it's not perfect, it's not perfect for us.
So let's go to a love in a family relationship, because I've been having this confusion for forever. When I see a family member suffering,
yeah,
I suffer too. I mean, it makes me feel pain that a family member is suffering. And do I understand that as attachment and I should not suffer because somebody else is suffering? Or
have a look at that. That's sort of a mental way of going about it, and that's true. But let's do a different route today. It's like, notice the suffering because your brother is suffering. And notice the sweetness in that. You find that?
Yeah.
That's why you make yourself suffer. You still make yourself suffer. You don't suffer what he suffers. You have no clue what he is experiencing. But you make yourself suffer because there's a sweetness to it. What is that sweetness?
What do you mean sweetness?
Yeah, what do I mean sweetness? You said, yeah, you knew what I was talking about. Now the mind is coming in.
Sweetness. Well, I understood sweetness because there's also love for him. But it doesn't feel sweet when I hurt.
Exactly. So why are you giving yourself that suffering? You don't, if he has a disease, he has the disease, you don't. But now suddenly there's two people suffering from that disease.
Isn't it natural of the human being to feel suffering when someone is suffering?
Well, you see, there are different stages and layers of that. There is a layer where you completely don't care. So somebody can be dying next to you and you just don't care. You're like a rock, right? Okay, so we all know that that exists. Unfortunately, way too much of it in this world. And I'm not even talking about the situations where people actually cause somebody else to suffer. So that's that place where you're just sort of staying in neutral and in cold and you're just dead, basically. There's this person next to you suffering and you're dead. You don't feel anything, you have no compassion. It's just like, screw him or her, right? So that's the first thing. Then we get some compassion. And then we go into that state that you're talking about. And there's many layers to that. There's many levels to that. It's like you start feeling something for somebody else. And this is first awakening of the heart. You know, the heart chakra opens up a little bit. Oh, you know, there's something going on other than me. I, me, myself, and mine. Right? So you open up and that suffering is actually, that suffering for someone else is then actually an evolutionary step out of that, state of being a rock, of not feeling at all, right? And with that comes that sweetness, because you're actually, now you're evolving through that suffering to a certain extent, right? And it goes all the way to these like incredible practices of like Tonglen and Tibetan Buddhism, where you take on, consciously, you take on other people's suffering. You have this kind of, let me suffer, let them be free of it. Profound practice. And in the end, you have to transcend that too. And that's what we're talking about here. You have to understand that for two people to be in pain, there's no sense in that. What is true compassion? Oh, I feel so miserable because you're miserable. That's true love, darling. Or to say, oh, you're miserable. How can I help you? I'm fully present for you. I'm here to help. And present is the key word. I'm fully present with you. I'm not cut off and I don't care, right? I'm fully present with you. Now, the interesting thing is when we do healing work inside of ourselves, what's the most healing thing? Presence. To be present with ourselves. If I have a stomach ache or some kind of an illness, or let's more stay with like emotional pain. Like I have this lump of fear here, right? What's the most healing thing to do with this fear here in my throat? To be present with it. We do fight, flight, indulge, and complain with it. We do anything but. We consider this an enemy or a threat. We try to get rid of it, right? That only makes it worse. So in order for it to heal, we become present. And when you can give that presence to someone else, that's profoundly healing. Maybe they cannot give that to themselves as fully yet. But now we're talking presence, because when you're busy with your suffering, you cannot be present with your brother.
And I've experienced that, and I was able to be in that moment of presence and to be detached from what I call empathy or compassion. And I was able to feel that there was a little bit of suffering in me. So I've progressed in that. But still there are moments where
it's okay. You don't have to, don't force yourself into a new state of your evolution. That never works, right? Just notice. When you're hurting about someone else, then notice that and just become fully aware. Be present to that. You see, again, it's that presence. What is that presence? To open and to pay attention and to be present. Basic building blocks of love. That's what you're doing when you're present with someone else. You're showing up in love. Because let's go back to that moment of discussing falling in love with you, right? What happens when two people fall in love? They're fully present. It may just be an eighth of a second, but it will be so powerful that people build their entire lives on that. But hey, why don't we live in it? Why an eighth of a second, or maybe a month, like a honeymoon, a sweet month? We can live in that. You can encounter your brother and you can encounter every living being with that presence, with that love, with that profound clarity and peace radiating from you, but only if you allow yourself to experience it.
So what is empathy?
What is it for you? For me, ultimately, it's showing up. Showing up. And when we show up, the depth and the gentleness and also the power of our nature manifests naturally. They just come out. We are that way. We're in these incredible beings. Remember, what are we? This unlimited awareness. What's known as God in some cultures, as Brahman in other cultures, as pure being. The awareness in which all this arises, this cosmic presence, that's who we are. And when you can show up as that with another human being, that is powerful. It's powerful for you, but you may just experience it as absolutely natural, no big deal. But it's certainly powerful for somebody who is stuck in some kind of suffering. So to me, that's empathy, and that's the same as love. I don't know how people define words. Everybody defines it a little different. Isn't it?
I had an experience with my dad in January where he went into the hospital and I was flying out there 2 weeks before he passed to be with him. And he ended up being in the hospital, those 2 weeks. I didn't know how long he was going to be there. And I had been through suffering with other family members before, but I hadn't been heart sourcing at the time. And when I was on the plane going out to LA, it's a long plane ride. I spent the entire time looking at the window and heart sourcing, and just knew that I needed to be in my heart to be able to be there for my dad and my family and me. It was everyone. And I got out there and it was intense. I mean, it was my love of my life, my dad, who, raised my sisters and I on his own. And it was incredibly beautiful, loving experience, because I just absolutely kept dropping into my heart. And I would have my moments, but they were moments. And I would just bring myself back in. That plane ride, I didn't even know the time, because I was just in that space. And I just knew I needed to be there. And it was such a different experience. I was present and stable through the experience to share with him and my loved ones. Whereas before an experiences like that, I got caught up in the suffering, and then I would fight and flight, and that would be my pattern. I do everything, I'd go straight to that behavior. And this one was just completely present and absolutely amazing. So the difference was quite huge.
I just wanted to say, if you're, at least my understanding of it is, if you're living in the presence that is what we call love, if that is where you are, there's actually the concepts of suffering, compassion, and empathy are wiped away, because everyone is safe. So no matter what is happening in your field of observation, you know through and through that everyone is safe.
Yeah, you know that, but you also have the awareness that someone else may not know that.
Right.
And so you're with them and they need you to be there unconditionally.
Correct.
And if you have a filter of suffering on you about their suffering, you're busy with yourself.
Yeah, I noticed that.
You're not with them, at least to some extent.
But once you're in that purity, it somehow doesn't seep in,
No, I
You
know.
just-
And to me, it's unbelievable to be able to notice when I'm cutting the suffering and like just that noticing allows me to step out of it, of that moment of suffering. And then when that happened, I was able to be with him still, and just show him that there's someone out there that is not suffering, because everybody else is suffering.
And when you're with someone like this and your suffering comes in, don't suppress it. Just see it for what it is. There it is. And if you can see it as that little stream of attachment, it may stay, it may go away, but then it is not owning you. And you're in the process of becoming free of it. Alan?
I had an example of just that. It was both at the same time.
Right.
So there was the suffering, but it was a different kind of suffering.
Exactly.
So
exactly,
I had, in my case, it was a girl who died at 21 years old. So this is very sad, and the mother was there. I had tears because I'm human. I could see it.
He works in an emergency room for you to know.
Oh yeah. So I work in an emergency room. We were working her for a while. She's 21. So it is what it is. But I took the mother as I had a little time to be with her after. And what I noticed was the difference was we're both kind of in tears. She's a wreck, of course, but I was deeply feeling viscerally the sadness. But there was a difference. She was locked into it. And I noticed that I had the emotions, but there was a lot of space around it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was kind of spontaneously feeling this energy, but there was this space that was kind of big enough that it can accommodate her to come up for air if she wanted to. And she felt it. She felt it, and I could see it because she just kind of became this embrace, and it became a closeness, and suffering was there, but she would come up for air. And so, I felt like my job, maybe this is for this moment, what I need to do is embrace her with space, like a heart space, and it's okay to come up from that. If she does, there's no forcing.
But it's beautiful when you're saying come up for air. What you really mean, of course, is come into presence.
Yes.
Out of her story of my daughter died, she shouldn't have died, this is terrible, I'm suffering. Even that is a thought at first, So she comes out of that, and then there's somebody, Alan, present and available. That's huge in that moment. Available. Somehow that consciousness that where we started here today, that consciousness that is timeless, present, blissful, absolutely peaceful, the peace that passes all understanding. And as her world of her mind is falling apart because her daughter is dying, someone is there holding that space for her. That is immensely powerful and an irreplaceable gift.
And transferable. I mean, it's like you're transferring that energy so it's not only you being in that space, but you're providing it for your loved ones and the people who, you feel are suffering around you. So.
And it's transferable. You're very right about that. And it's very interesting, going back to you, saying, this feels, and then the thought comes in, I can't allow that. For whatever reason, old conditioning comes in, like, I can't allow that. Like, because then we're afraid, like for instance, when we're talking about falling in love, we're becoming afraid that it'll be personal. We become afraid of getting locked into the marriage jail. It's going to be the next thing, or the emotional relationship jail, right? We all know that. It's horrible. It's horrible. So I understand why you wouldn't want to fall in love like that. But this love, that what is actually love, is not personal. The person doesn't love, it wants something. When you're there with the mother whose daughter has just died in your hands, you're there unconditional, even though you may be crying, you may be a mess, because you're like there with your whole body, trying to save this life, and it didn't work in this case, right? But something inside of you is clear as a bell. Not even a bell. A bell is too much. just clear, present. If you can do that with your brother, fantastic. You know? And it's not that they have to feel it to make us happy. Or, no, I shouldn't say feel, that they need to be aware of it and acknowledge it in some way. Oh no, that's another ego trap. And you just do it and you walk on. You know, that's this way of the enlightened life where you can be in love with everyone and everything and appear absolutely ordinary. That is the way to be. Nothing special. In the beginning of spiritual life, I was walking around like this. It's fine. But it's phony as hell. But it's better than like that, yeah. You know? So it's all steps, you know? But eventually, it's like nothing special. That's the most special thing. Right? You're just there, and this woman, her mother, may have a moment of actually receiving the transmission of what? Of nothing. That's the transmission. Because everything that's something in her world is like falling apart. The transmission is that nothing. And I look at you and we fall in love. It's that transmission of nothing. Of the most ordinary thing in the world, that we are one in this awareness in which these two bodies appear, allowing us to play this dance of relationship, the supreme dancing with itself as all these different people. And we just get to the point where we don't believe the separate part anymore. That's when it becomes fun.
I just always tell myself every day, you know, meet others in the heart, meet others in the heart. That's like my mantra. We are all one love, meet in that space. And it's so peaceful. And I really feel the connection in the heart with others, with everybody. I don't care who it is. It could be, you know, in a mall or a supermarket or in Satsang. It's the same connection when I just, that's my intention.
Just keep going back, keep going back.
Mm-hmm.
Dropping into the heart again and again and again. That's the practice. And the heart doesn't want anything. Oh, I love that. So attachment comes right in. No, it's not like that. It's like, you know, a lot is being talked now about being present. It's exactly the same thing. It's about being present, but deeper than just with your mind awareness. Being present in that full realization of oneness. And that can come as a tiny little thing at first. That's perfect. It comes in whatever way it comes. It doesn't have to be a big, oh, I'm so in love. This is attachment again.
At what point do you know that it's attachment? I mean, I know that it's when
Because
you're
it
suffering.
hurts.
When it hurts.
Although the old conditioned ego may choose that hurt because that's the pain body, it feeds the pain body. So it's like, oh yeah, let me lap that up for a while, right? It's actually goes after it.
Mhm.
So when you notice anything happening in your field of awareness that hurts you, ask yourself, is the pain body somehow involved here? And you will find it. And when you find it, you become conscious of that, and that eliminates the pain body over time with repetition, right? And pain bodies are just amazing, amazing in the way this works. It's because you are it all. When that you is adulterated by the ego, mind, pain body thing, right? That suffering can come from anywhere. I had a lot to do, of course, with the, because I'm German by birth, with the whole story of the Germans and the Jews, and this sort of perpetrator-victim thing that is national or racial identity, you know, huge and vicious stuff. And it will continue to exist to bring beings to the point where they just get tired of the game, where they can see deeper and can see that there is an exit out of that collective suffering of races, of tribes, of gender, the women's version of the men's version of it, the suffering of families that runs in families and communities and countries. You know, we're all these ways we're attuned to these levels of karmic messes. And what is it? Is it like this terrible stuff? No, not at all. It's simply our ladder to climb up on. You know, when you're German, you feel that there's a monster inside of you somewhere deep inside, but you want to really just keep that down and not feel it and make yourself not aware of it because you really don't want to go there. If you're Jewish, you have a sense of being a victim, being perpetrated or persecuted by people because it's happened for thousands of years, or at least many hundreds. Well, we just have the history of it starting in the Bible. And we need to find out that we're bigger than that. But you can only find out that you're bigger than your particular story of suffering, whether it's personal or family or tribe or nation or gender or whatever, sexual orientation, whatever your suffering is. You have to just understand that you are bigger than all of it. And you have to address that suffering and transcend it. That's the only way to get free of it. As long as you're trying to brush it under the rug, it will stay in you and fester. And any kind of pretense at enlightenment will just remain that, a pretense. And, you know, we try our best, but, you know, this stuff, it doesn't go away unless we somehow deal with it or by grace. And grace is amazing because there are beings in this world that we, but not you as a individual ego, have created. See, this is where the mind gets screwed up again. We're talking about this like we know. We know about this awareness. I'm timeless awareness. Yeah, who's talking? Joe Schmo is talking, like little Ramgiri is like, oh yeah, I am this great awareness, right? And so it gets caught, and then suddenly it appears like I am manifesting my destiny here. Well, you don't even exist. So this way of thinking is just another trap that the ego just fell into. But presently there's too much money to be made on that, so we're going to ride that one for a while. Manifest your destiny, manifest your perfect life. Your perfect life is already being manifested by that vastness that the little you cannot even get near comprehending, because it's so much vaster. And that vastness of our being manifests as a world that is pushing our buttons, that does not understand us, all of that stuff. So we can get bigger and bigger and bigger in our understanding, and in bigger and bigger and bigger in our hearts, and in that way just get past all these obstructions, all the things that want to keep us small and confined in that ego shell. Who had their hand up?
I did.
You did?
When you say manifesting your destiny, it sounds very like aggressively chasing our dream. And this process is teaching me to kind of do the opposite. It's like it's teaching me to kind of slow down and smell the roses, go into that space of the heart connection. And by doing that, I engage with others on a whole other level. And I notice every day, I'm like, oh my God, all the people that smile and we exchange that kind of energy is just amazing, because that moment of presence takes a step. Time, I know there's nothing like as time, but it creates a space to have that connection, to transfer the energy with each other. And I used to go through life thinking, oh my God, it's so scary and everyone's so mean. And it's very rare that I have that feeling now, because it's a different experience that I'm learning.
And in that, be open for that to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Because what that is, if something comes and pushes your button and you shut down and you contract, and that's just really the beginning of another step of the death of your ego, which is the birth of your real self. It's like you got to go to that door. It says death on this side, birth on that side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when that happens and, trouble, challenges occur, there's still challenges. We're not sugarcoating them, but we understand their value in the process of this unfolding, right? Mm-hmm. So, think for a moment, let's do this practically. Think for a moment about like the worst thing that could happen to you, whatever that is for each one of you. Doesn't that come to you? Something that you really don't ever want to experience again. So I don't ever want to experience blank again. Got it? Now we turn that around. I'm willing to experience this again. Can you feel that? That has to be real. Why? Because you can live in fear of it, and then your whole life is messed up by that fear, right? Constant, like being on guard. It may happen again, who knows? It's certainly better to be willing, to be open to it, right? And if you're open to it, you're inviting growth to happen in whatever way it allows itself to happen, right? Then the next turnaround, so the first one is I'm willing to experience this dreadful thing again. The next one is, I look forward to experiencing this again. See if you can feel that. If you can feel that it shows up, it feels real in your body. And maybe you can just go to I'm willing. It's okay, don't overstep your bounds, but try out. It's like slip into that shoe, see if it fits. I look forward to experiencing this again. Why would you look forward to? We're not masochists here. You would look forward to it because if it is meant to happen, if it's still, in other words, if this particular dreadful thing is something that you must and therefore can master, overcome, transcend, be free of completely, then why not look forward to it? You're already the being that is beyond that, but you don't know that yet. You will only know that when you actually go beyond it. And then there is even another one, but that's reserved for those who are really just determined to be living in love. And it goes like that. I can't wait to experience this again. See if that in any way can be real for you. And it doesn't have to be. If you're really set to become free, that's the ticket. And consumer warning, be careful what you ask for, because it may come. But what you're really asking for here in this context of this understanding is your freedom. Your bliss that's waiting for you. That's your true nature. This boundless love. This way of being, nothing special at all. You see, the only part of us that ever feels special is the ego. The true self is special. It doesn't have to feel special. And the ego, in its feeling special, that's the most ordinary thing in the world, because every ego is like that.
I think that's incredibly beautiful. And it speaks to a quote that Maharaji said that I didn't get until the day that I met you. Do you remember the homeless lady or the very poor lady who came by and was selling chocolates?
Yeah.
You gave her $2.
Yes.
So she said something to me in the parking lot
Oh.
before that made me think of what you just said.
So what is it?
Which was suffering. It was somebody came to Maharaji and said, Maharaji, I suffer so much. And he said to her, oh, suffering. I love suffering. It brings me closer to God.
Yeah.
I never understood that. And you just encompass that.
That's it.
Yeah.
And this is how you can actually, it's just, you can't just go, I love suffering, right? We have to go step by step, right? So you think about the worst suffering that could happen to you. Then you say, are you willing? And that may be huge already. And if you really feel that, that may be huge. And it's such a profound step out of prison, the prison of fear. Oh my God, is it going to happen again? Like if somebody had cancer and lives in this fear of a relapse. Just an example, right? But we all have our cancer, whatever that is. I'm willing. It's like to really feel that, to really have that be true is huge. And then to go from there to I look forward to, this may just be too much at this point, right? So gauge yourself. But understand that that's the door. And it's not that this, you see here, this is again where this whole New Age stuff gets very screwed up and people think, oh, if I think like that, then I'll bring it on. Oh, no, you're not. You're just freeing yourself from the nightmare of your life that is actually bringing it on, because that fear of cancer, let's say, is happening there in your subconscious mind. And on the surface, you're busy trying to manifest your perfect destiny, right? But here's this fear of cancer, and guess which one is going to be more powerful? Your ego, New Age dream, or that old fear that has you by the gonads? That is going to run the show. So what we need to do is bring that up. And how do you bring that up? And how do you say yes to that? Is a process of surrender. And not a process of your little ego trying to live its perfect little life. It's a process of surrender to the tremendous presence of pure awareness of God's love in you. And then, and only then, will you see that that love, nothing less than that love, brings you whatever life brings you. Because remember, let's go back to the beginning today, whatever comes your way, you are actually bringing your way. But not your little ego you, which is in the process of dying off. But the great you, the cosmic you, the you that is free beyond any conception of freedom, because that's all too small of a box. A freedom so radical that the mind cannot comprehend it, but the heart can live it. And it lives it very simply, in every moment, just being present, being there, looking at other people's eyes and seeing yourself reflected back and wishing them well and embracing them in some hidden place deep inside of you that does not have to be expressed other than being lived in your heart. Now I have this awareness, if you have a saint sitting on one side of a concrete wall and there's somebody sitting on the other side of the concrete wall, this person gets a profound blessing. You may have no clue who's on the other side of the wall. It's just that radiation of the self-liberated presence of the divine self. And that means all of us. And so we're just busy day after day peeling away another little layer of nonsense, and eventually we'll be there, because what's doing the peeling, even though we have an individual consciousness and we have skills and practices to do that, but what's really inspiring us to do all of this is that great freedom in us. So it's really running the show. We think we're somebody, but the way it actually is that we're being lived by that deeper presence in us, that great and profound love that comes as divine bliss, and it comes as cancer. Both. In exactly the right proportions, in exactly the right timing. It comes as the death of a loved one. It comes as falling in love. It comes as all of that. And it only has one purpose, and that is to liberate us. And the best thing we can do is get out of the way of it. And how do we get out of the way of it? Stop wanting something else. Be with what is. If I get hit by a car tomorrow, I know that is the best way of it. And of course, I'm going to try to avoid it. There's always practical reality. We're going to stick with that. Okay, anyone else? Let's take a moment and just drink from that liquid love in the heart. So just let all the words and thoughts go by and bring your attention to that place of the heart. And be present with that. Be in touch with that. Drink from that essence. Let it flow into each cell of your body. And realize that you are the lover and the beloved as one. And therefore, opening to love is the safest thing in the world. Take a deep breath. And know that it's always there. Always, always, always. It's a matter of remembering. And when you feel that essence of the heart, why would you remember? It's the most delicious thing to remember. Namaste.